A lot can change in 4 years. 4 years since the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 3. 4 years, and Sega, the one-time market leader, had fallen far behind its rivals. But in 1998, a dream was cast, and the company got one final opportunity to turn things around.
4 years is a long time.
I'm Josh Wallen, and this is the Geek Critique for Sonic Adventure. So, what does Sonic Adventure mean to you? To some people, it's an embarrassing relic of the feudal days of 3D gaming. A glitchy, unstable mess of a game that only helped to drive the nails into Sega's coffin. Bafflingly, to other people, it's the closest Sonic ever came to doing 3D right. A landmark title that showed Sega meant business. What I'm saying is it's a little bit of a divisive game. Either way, Adventure did see the Hedgehog finally make the leap to 3D after sitting on the sidelines throughout the previous generation. And honestly, maybe it's a good thing he did. I say that for two reasons. For one, the first half of the 90s were bursting at the seams with Sonic, and taking a hiatus freshened up the series. For two, I just don't think the Saturn could have really done Sonic justice. Now don't get me wrong, I'm sure a good game featuring Sonic could have been feasible, but 3D was brand new, and I think we needed to learn to Mario with this new dimension before we could learn how to Sonic. But even if Sega could have made it feel right, the sheer size of the stages that a high-speed platformer necessitates would have made it impossible at the time. In much the same way 2D Sonic couldn't have really been made manifest in 8-bit, 3D Sonic just couldn't have been done right in 32-bit. Enter the Dreamcast. Technology had come a long way, and I'd never seen anything like this. It's so compact and smooth. It gets online. They say it is literally thinking. And for the first time, you can't even see individual polygons on the characters. This thing knew how to Sonic. After 2 years in development and a vacation in Central America, Sonic Adventure was revealed to the world. In August of '98, I remember going to AOL keyword ant. I saw a teaser image. Finally, after all this time, a brand new Sega! What have they done? This was my first view of the redesigned modern Sonic, and at 10 years old, I hated it. He was lanky and gangly and awkward, with color-clashing green eyes and a smirk that said, "Yeah, I'm trying way too hard to be cool now." Sonic had always been cool. He had this badass, yeah, whatever flippancy that masked so much heart, so much determination. The new artwork made him look like the Poochie that those vile Nintendrones always said he was. What? Then I clicked on this picture, and... okay, wait for it, it was dial-up. I breathed a sigh of relief. The art style might have been bad, but the in-game model was much better. Sonic's few appearances on the Saturn made one thing clear. He looked weird in 3D. The character was built to run on a 2D plane, not with a camera trailing behind him. Modern Sonic's longer legs and curved spines combined with a new running animation to keep him looking happening. And his green eyes serve to... yeah, I still don't get that one. But the character design wasn't the only thing that needed to be modernized. The franchise's continuity was a convoluted mess. In only about 7 years, let's see. We had the Japanese stories where Sonic lived alongside humans on Earth, the American stories that took place on Mobius, the US comic, the UK comic, the Insane Adventures cartoon, the gritty, realistic Saturday morning cartoon, the god-awful Sonic Underground cartoon, the OVA where Knuckles wore the hat. God, trying to follow all this was like a child-friendly introduction to multiverse theory. The Genesis trilogy was very light on in-game plot, leaving most of these finer details up to Sega's regional marketing. But Adventure built on its predecessor. Where Sonic 3 introduced short, interlinking silent cutscenes to move the action along, Sonic Adventure is far more plot-focused, with fully voiced in-game cutscenes, and so it would serve to unify the chaos. Going forward, Sonic games would follow one single canon. Well, they would for the next 16 years anyway. Oh, the plot itself? Robotnik, whom we in the West discover is now called Eggman, learns of an ancient monster named Chaos, who was sealed away inside the Master Emerald 3,000 years ago. And he's like, what did go wrong? This causes Angel Island to once again crash back down to Earth. Somehow the Master Emerald shards are like Dragon Balls or something, because they scatter far and wide. And Knuckles gets to wander around and pick them up. Chaos is a shapeshifter, and was designed specifically as something that previous generation hardware could not achieve. The more Chaos Emeralds the bad doctor feeds him, the stronger Chaos gets. He comes across like more of an entity than a character, and that's actually really cool given what we learn about him. This monster chaos was an awesome contrast to Eggman's usual, more technology-focused schemes. Unbeknownst to Eggman, he also set free the spirit of Tikal, an ancient echidna who sealed Chaos and herself in the Master Emerald. She manifests as a ball of light, and in terms of gameplay, that serves as your hint system. The ball of light is easy to spot, but you won't accidentally activate it or be interrupted by it, since you have to jump into it. A hint system would have been ludicrous in 2D, but it makes sense here, both thanks to the more complex controls, and because Sonic Adventure split its areas into two styles. There are 3 adventure stages, open hub worlds where most of the story plays out. Within them, you solve ridiculous puzzles where runes fall out of the sky, to gain access to the more traditional action stages. Hub worlds were a staple of 3D platformers at the time, yet another principle that was codified in Mario 64. They were a safe space to learn to move and explore in 3 dimensions. These adventure fields were all creatively varied, and never too confusing or repetitive. I remember spending hours just running around the Mystic Ruins, spin-dashing off of mountains and trying to land on the Master Emerald. I'm not sure if I'd have the patience for them nowadays, but if you do get lost, the hint markers always point you in the right direction. The hub worlds are also where you'll find most of the upgrades. These I'm not such a fan of. I mean, adding moves as the game goes on, that's great. But ruining the clean aesthetics of the cast in the process? I mean, look at Knuckles. What even is that? Meanwhile, back at the plot, Sonic...
Oh yeah! This is happening!
...is not voiced by Jaleel White. I'm not kidding. Hearing anyone else's voice come out of that character was the weirdest thing in the world to me in '99.
Do your lungs a favor. Plant a tree.
Ryan Drummond happens upon this liquid monster, calls him a big drip, and sends him packing. But he knows nothing, fool! It's Chaos! The god of destruction! Ah, see, the emeralds are like Dragon Balls. But True Blue won't be alone. Tails quickly joins up with him after wrecking a new prototype biplane, and they soon cross paths with Knuckles on his scavenger hunt. Meanwhile, Eggman builds some bipedal robots. Amy Rose is just here again. And chaos happens upon a frog who somehow eats his tail, so an enormous feline abomination has to fish to catch the frog. The Sonic series is known for iconic melodies, and Sonic Adventure is legendary even among them. It's insane how varied and memorable these tunes are. And seriously, this soundtrack puts even modern video games to shame. The cutscenes, on the other hand, are the most aged part of the experience. At their best, they'll have you wondering why we ever thought this was impressive. At their worst, everybody just looks like marionettes. Now, the story itself is fine, but it's undermined by hilarious facial expressions and awful lip syncing. The actual dialogue is typical of Japanese to English dubs of the era, and that's not a compliment. Characters just tend to speak in exposition. Sonic 3 rounded out the classics with 3 playable characters, but Adventure would double that. This tends to be a real point of contention nowadays. 6 playable characters, each with their own unique playstyle, abilities, and path through the story. Let's just see if that was a good idea. Sonic's your main man, with the longest story and the most stages, and he'll get the bulk of my focus as well. The homing attack will be an integral part of the arsenal from here on, and so long as the perspective is 3D, I think it's fine. As for the spin dash, charging it used to feel like pulling back a slingshot, but in Adventure it's mapped to one button, and it can be spammed. You don't have to be standing still to use it. It's overpowered as hell, but god, it's fun. Sonic Team spent a lot of time thinking about how the classic gameplay could be adapted to 3D. The slopes and physics and momentum are all still present, and for the most part, the level design supports them well. There are multiple paths and even secrets, shortcuts, and goodies for going off the obvious route. Most of the stages make good use of 3D space and great use of Sonic's abilities and momentum. Sonic feels unhinged and loose, and if you know what you're doing, he's a joy to control. If you don't, though, a lot more can go wrong in 3-dimensional space. There are plenty of areas where Adventure comes pretty close to actually being classic Sonic in 3D, but there are plenty of areas where it does not. Boost pads will become just as integral as the homing attack in making sure Sonic goes exactly where the game needs him to. No longer will he burn through loops and shoot off ramps based on the player's skill. Those moments are now exclusively automated, and often used in conjunction with something I'll call Spectacle. Spectacle is the moment the whale crashes through the dock on Emerald Coast. Spectacle is every time the camera pulls back to show Sonic speeding around a loop, getting pulled into a tornado, and then making your way up and out of it, snowboarding just ahead of an avalanche, blazing like a maniac down the side of a building. Spectacle is going through a series of S-shaped tunnels and being flung high into the air off of a half-pipe. Spectacle is not a bad thing. It was always a part of the appeal of this series. I used this music back in the Sonic 1 video, and that was very deliberate. I imagine that moment was just as much of an adrenaline rush for kids playing Sonic in 1991 as Speed Highway's Skyscraper was for me 7 years later. Now, the focus on spectacle over substance will be to the detriment of the series going forward, but for the most part, Adventure Spectacle was extremely impressive, well chosen, and most importantly, it was still focused on gameplay. The problem comes when you consider that Sonic running up the inside of a tree was no longer impressive by 1999. But even when the shine wore off the classics, there was still a rock-solid game underneath. Sonic Adventure, well, you strip away the spectacle, and what you're left with is anything but rock solid. There are times when I mean that literally. These glitches don't break the game by any means. It's still very playable, and when it works, it has a fluidity befitting the classics. But when that flow breaks, it breaks hard. Even aside from the death traps, characters stick to geometry in close quarters. The camera is wonky and badly positioned. Even the snowboard section's a bumpy ride. Half the reason that I do still have fun with Adventure is because I generally know how to avoid the instability. I know when, and just as importantly, when not to press forward so I don't break the scripts. Learning how not to break the game should not be the player's responsibility. Speaking of breaking the game, though, you've got Tails. In Sonic 3, Tails was the easy option, thanks to his ability to fly over obstacles and find secret paths. And that's the idea here, too. His flight's much faster, and he uses that to essentially break Sonic's stages in order to outrace him. Often there are flight rings that automatically fling you the right way, but it's always cooler when you intune a more clever path. Tails is a lot of fun. Knuckles could climb walls and glide, and those abilities are put to use in 3D. He puts the adventure in Sonic Adventure. His stages are wide open and non-linear, as some kind of internal radar leads him to the Master Emerald shards. He controls well, aside from wall climbing feeling a bit too sticky at times, but whether he's fun or not all comes down to the level design. Casinopolis is all indoors with stacked layers, and it's easy to feel like you're just gliding in circles waiting for the radar to go off. By far his best stage is the expansive Red Mountain. I really like how the classic trio turned out. Sonic Team honed in on what made each of them unique and designed their gameplay around it. It's just hard not to wish for a little more from Tails and Knuckles. I'd have liked to see their stages span the length of Sonic's instead of just select sections. And Emerald hunting is okay, but I also kinda wish Knuckles had just had more linear stages of his own that put his abilities to use, more like the exclusive paths in Sonic 3. That brings us to the trio of new playable characters. Amy's game involves solving incredibly simple puzzles while fleeing the indestructible robot Zero. Sonic Team remembered their lore and gave her the Pico Pico hammer to fend him off. I think the team might have wanted to bring in some tactical espionage action, but it never really comes into focus. Her game is the shortest, and I love the hammer jump. E102 Gamma puts us in the role of one of Eggman's badniks for the first time. The team had always wanted to implement a shooting mechanic, but were sensible enough to recognize that an anthropomorphic hedgehog has no business wielding a gun. The timer ticks down for Gamma, and you lose if it runs out. Gamma can add to it by comboing multiple targets. Why would Eggman build a robot that literally dies if it goes too long without shooting something? Actually, no, wait a minute. That sounds exactly like something he'd do. Gamma is influenced by Amy to turn on his creator, and seeing the evil that Eggman does, he sets out to rescue the other E-Series robots. And by that I mean...
E103 Delta, rescue complete.
Oh, so that's how you rescue your brother. Maybe it's the lack of goofy facial expressions, but Gamma's story is the closest this story ever comes to affecting genuine depth. In the end, Gamma self-destructs to set the animal inside free. It's completely out of left field to use this cutesy explanation from the classics in this way, but I think that's why it's such an effective emotional gut punch. And speaking of guts, it's the last member of the SA crew, Big the Cat. He spends the game waddling after his pal Froggy. You get to fish for him. And I thought Amy was slow-paced. Much as everyone likes to rag on Big, including the official Twitter account, I can't say I hate the Big Lug. I think he was thrown in mainly to show off the Dreamcast realistic water effects. And yeah, the fishing is clunky and the camera is bad, but his game is always over so fast I barely notice. In retrospect though, Sonic Team would have been better served to cut Big, Amy, and maybe even Gamma, and give that development time to Tails and Knuckles instead. But I don't really bemoan their decision. I remember well a time when the internet was positively teeming with fake guides on how to unlock Luigi in Mario 64. Playable characters were a big selling point for 3D platformers. An adventure boasting 6 of them was a huge deal. The boss battles don't fare so well. In the classics, the bosses were tests of how well the player had mastered the controls, physics, and gimmicks of a boss. If you knew what you were doing, they could be over really fast. Sonic Adventure's bosses tend to, again, be more about spectacle. You dodge attacks until the boss shows its weak spot, hit that, and repeat. Now that doesn't mean they're awful, it is a valid way to design bosses, and the Egg Viper, Chaos 6, and even Zero and E101 Beta are all a lot of fun. Some of them just seem to go on and on and on! The most egregious by far is Chaos 4, who does almost nothing but shoot out lily pads and throw simple attacks. Dodge, wait for him to surface, run around some more. It's made even worse because Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles all have to fight it. And it's just the same thing every time. Those unique abilities don't make a difference here. That repetition really gets bad in the original Dreamcast version, where you can't skip the cutscenes. I hate when games don't let you skip cutscenes, and it's even worse here because it's so much fun to see the same exact thing play out from 27 different perspectives. You also get to enjoy both acts of the utterly tepid Sky Chase minigame as both Sonic and Tails. At some point in every adventure, Tikal's spirit appears and whisks a character into the distant past, revealing the backstory. Tikal was the daughter of a warmongering ruler of the Echidna tribe. Her father intended to use the Master Emerald's power to conquer the world, enraging the entity that protected the Emeralds, Chaos. Chaos absorbed the Emerald's power and killed the Warmongers, leading Tikal to seal them both in the Master Emerald. Chaos was guarding the children of the Emeralds, the Chow, and here's yet another mechanic in Sonic Adventure. The animals you rescue in stages can be brought to Chow Gardens, and they take on the traits of the animals you give them, to build stats to compete in races. The only time I ever really cared about Chow was in Sonic Adventure, and it was all because the Chow could be transferred to the Dreamcast's awesome VMU memory card, where you could name them, win fruit, and mate with other Chow. Kinky. To digress, these flashback scenes are a missed opportunity. Every character experiences them, but nobody ever talks about them, not even Knuckles. He's supposed to be the last of his race, the guardian of the Master Emerald. Yet when confronted for the first time by people who look like him, all he can say is,
This is very strange.
And people say Knuckles isn't a dumbass. No wonder Eggman tricks him all the time. I think these flashbacks would have been more effective if they had played out in order. If you complete Sonic's game first, you see one of the very last scenes before any of the others. The playable characters never really interact with anyone in the past. And considering they also never discuss it amongst themselves, Sonic Team might have intended them to happen chronologically at some point in development. Once you get through every character's story, you unlock one more, Super Sonic. You can't use him in Sonic stages this time around, but given how unstable the engine was and how untested Sonic was in 3D anyway, I'll let Sonic Team off the hook this time. Instead, this consists of a short epilogue where Chaos comes back, absorbs all the emeralds, and absolutely obliterates Station Square. This scene is awesome. It blew my mind when I was a kid. But Chaos only absorbed the negative power of the emeralds, and our feelings toward each other can blah blah blah. Just do it already. Oh, yes! Oh, that is the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced in all my 12 years on this planet! Oh, Perfect Chaos, we are gonna take you down! Perfect Chaos, what a badass name. Supersonic rockets through the destroyed city, approaching the absolute beast that Chaos has become. It's a lot more challenging than I'm making it look, but it's exhilarating. It's kind of a funny harbinger of things to come, though, that winning comes down to little more than hitting boost pads and dodging obstacles. The big misstep here is that halfway through the fight, the amazing theme song, Open Your Heart, is replaced by this slow, repetitive theme. It should have really been the other way around. Beating Chaos to oblivion calms him down because this is a video game, and he and Tikal float off into the heavens.
All's well that ends well, right?
Well, sure, if you ignore the wrecked, flooded city and the inevitable death toll that all this took. Freaking Tails. But Eggman managed to survive, and in the blink of an eye, Sonic's after him again. Roll credits. So, what does Sonic Adventure mean to me? Well, on the one hand, it's a mess. It's unfocused, and in trying to do so much, it ends up being less than the sum of its parts. But when I think back to the first time I played it, I don't remember any of that. I don't remember the cutscenes being so cringeworthy. I don't remember the wonky physics or glitches or wondering why I was fishing in a Sonic game. I just had a blast playing it. Sonic was finally back, and just as importantly, well, look, it's easy to pick at just about any game of this era for the same reasons people pick at Sonic Adventure. The awkward and unnatural cutscenes, the convoluted yet distressingly simple excuse plot, the tenuous grasp on movement in a 3D space. What people tend to forget when they look at Sonic Adventure nowadays is that we actually did think this was impressive, because Sonic Adventure pushed the envelope beyond anything that had been done before. There's a reason this game turned out the way it did. It has 6 playable characters and tons of minigames and an A-Life system. It had online leaderboards and downloadable events and themes in 1999. It tried with so much ambition to take video game storytelling to the next level. It innovated the speed-focused 3D platformer, the same way the original game did for 2D 2 generations before. It was a genre-defining risk that fired on all cylinders and then some, and in so doing, changed the measuring stick of what a video game could be. Sonic Adventure was more than just the return of Sonic, it was the return of Sega. Now, none of that invalidates the criticism that I've laid here. There is also a reason the game was reviewed so much more harshly when it was re-released on the GameCube 5 years later. Because Sonic Adventure is very obviously flawed once the shine wears off. The same way this was no longer impressive in 1999, this was absolutely laughable, even by 2003. Make no mistake, from the focus on story, to the loads of playable characters, to the glitchy, unstable engine, to the reliance on spectacle in place of substance, nearly all the woes that would damn near kill the franchise began here. But Sonic Adventure itself has substance, despite what was to come. The fact that it's so dated now is a testament to how groundbreaking it was at the time. Sonic Adventure carried on its shoulders the responsibility of showcasing everything the Dreamcast had to offer. And so it was. It had to be the most ambitious game Sega ever made.